Hello, this is Miss Franchione, and I'm going to do an edition of First Chapter Friday. Mine's going to be a little different because instead of the first chapter, I'm going to read a preface, which, if you're not familiar with that, a preface is a little short piece that comes before the story that might be important. And I think this one is very exciting. The book that I want to talk about today, there are two versions of. This is the regular adult version. This is called Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. And I'm going to read from the young adult version, so I would suggest that you look at whichever one suits your reading needs better. One is designed a little more for middle school students, and the regular adult version is a little more detailed, and some of the language is very beautiful. All he could see in every direction was water. It was June 22nd, 1943. Somewhere on the Pacific Ocean, American military airman and Olympic runner Louis Zamperini lay on a small raft, drifting. Slumped beside him was another crewman. On another raft, tethered to the first, lay the pilot, a gash zigzagging across his forehead. Their bodies, sunburned and stained yellow from the dye of the rafts, had shrunken to skeletons. Sharks glided in lazy loops around them, dragging their backs along the rafts, waiting. The Second World War was raging, and in the Pacific, America and Japan were locked in a bloody struggle. Zamperini and his crew had been searching for a lost warplane when their bomber had crashed into the ocean. They'd been adrift for 27 days and had floated at least 1,000 miles. Their rafts were turning to jelly. The men's bodies were pocked with salt sores, and their burned lips so swollen that they pressed into their nostrils and their chins. They spent their days watching the sky, singing White Christmas, and muttering about food. They were all alone on 64 million square miles of ocean. A month earlier, 26-year-old Zamperini had been on one of the greatest runners in the world. Now his Olympian's body had wasted to less than 100 pounds, and his famous legs could not lift him. Almost everyone outside of his family had given him up for dead. On that 27th day, the men heard a distant, deep strumming. Their eyes caught a glint in the sky, a plane high overhead. Zamperini fired 2 flares and shook the powder dye into the water, enveloping the rafts in a circle of vivid orange. The plane kept going, slowly disappearing. The men sagged. Then the plane reappeared. The crew had seen them. Overjoyed, the castaways shouted. Waving arms starved to little more than bone and skin, the plane dropped low and swept alongside the rafts. Zamperini could see the crewmen's profiles dark against bright blueness. Suddenly there was a terrific roar, and the ocean seemed to boil. It was machine gun fire. This wasn't an American rescue plane. It was a Japanese bomber. The men pitched themselves into the sea and hung under the rafts, cringing as bullets pierced the rubber and sliced lines in the water around their faces. The firing blazed on and then sputtered out as the bomber overshot them. The men dragged themselves onto the one raft that was still mostly inflated. The bomber circled toward them again, the machine gun taking aim. Zamperini's crewmates were too weak to go back into the water. As they lay down, hands over their head, Zamperini splashed overboard alone. Somewhere below, the sharks were done waiting. They bent their bodies in the water and swam towards the man under the raft. And that is the end of the preface, and that is supposed to get you a little excited about reading this book. I want to tell you a couple things about this. It is not just a rescue story. It is not just a war story. It is not just the story of a famous Olympian. It's really the story of an extraordinary man and some extraordinary things he did in his lifetime. The first thing I want to tell you is that he is from Torrance, California, and this is where I lived before I moved back to Lafayette. And this is a picture of him wearing his track shirt from Torrance High. And I know the last couple of years the Torrance High track team has made their track uniforms look just like this as a tribute to him. As I said, he was an Olympic athlete. This book has got a lot of pictures in it, so you'll get a lot of real pictures from his life. And pictures of, like, this is not those men, but this is a picture of 3 men in a life raft, and imagine what it was like being stranded in the middle of the Pacific Ocean on a raft this small with sharks underneath you, wanting, I'm guessing, lunch. But he was an extraordinary man. I got to meet him several times before he passed away. You can see in this picture he carried the Olympic torch in the 1984 Olympics. He ran with the torch. And you can see him on a skateboard here. He took up skateboarding in his 70s. He was kind of an incredible guy. And this is a picture of him as an old man in the same kind of airplane that he was shot down in. But this is a story of an Olympic hero. This is a story of a man who escaped some really incredible things during World War II. And the thing that I think makes him most heroic, even though he wouldn't like being called a hero, is that he forgave all of the people. He endured some really horrible torture at the hands of the guards in the POW camp where he was. And in the end, he went back and forgave them all. And when I think about surviving, maybe surviving horrible ordeals, that's one thing, but the idea of being able to go back and really forgive in your heart, and move past, I think that's what's really heroic about this man and this story. So I certainly hope some of you enjoy reading either version. Again, pick the version that's best for you. Unbroken, the young adult version, or this one, Unbroken, just the regular adult edition. And I think it's a fantastic read. Thanks, guys.